Good evening and welcome back from trip. Hope everybody had a great time. Nice break. And I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education on this Monday, April 21st, 2025. First, if we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we're going to can I get a motion, please, to review and approve the agenda for April 21st, 2025? Motion, Erica, Matt, second, all in favor? Excellent. And then if we can get a motion to approve the minutes of April 7th, 2025. Phil, second, Brendan, all in favor? Excellent. And next, another exciting student spotlight. Canaan High School student poetry reading.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. As many of you know, April is National Poetry Month. And we thought after months and months of budget discussions and numbers and inflation rates and CAFRs and everything else that we'd love to catch our breath here and celebrate National Poetry Month by inviting some of our students to join us tonight. National Poetry Month is a time to celebrate the power of language, the beauty of expression, and the voices of those who help us to see the world and ourselves just a little bit more clearly. Tonight, we're very fortunate to be joined by three of our very talented high school students. It's Amy Ment, Sophia Brooks, and Sebastian Gonzalez, whose original poems last year were selected as winners in the NCPS Poetry Fest. And the Poetry Fest, which is occurring this Thursday here at the high school, I think 7 o'clock start probably? 6 p.m. start, thank you, attracts many of our students, adjudicated by our English faculty and staff, and it's always a wonderful night. I used to always enjoy that as a high school principal too. Our three students tonight work stood out for their creativity, their emotional depth, the voice, and the unique perspectives that each of them brings to the page. So please join me in welcoming. First we'll start with Amy, and then Sophia, and then Sebastian, as they share their award-winning, wonderful poems with us. Welcome. Right to the podium, if you would.
Hello, my name is Amy. I'm just going to read from my phone here. So my poem is titled Nirwa's Daughter. So just to preface everything, Nirwa is a Chinese term. It means the mother goddess in Chinese mythology. She is the creator of humankind. So, Nirwa's daughter. I like to think I was sculpted out of mud, pulled the pearly string that held the necklace together, stabbed hairpins into my scalp, the way silence tumbles over broken sentences. You brand me the all-natural citizen, but I hesitate to speak the mother tongue of polished jade, shattered porcelain. Smoke covers my peony lips, threatens to pluck out my dusty eyelashes one by one. Throw them into the Pacific that separates me from home. And maybe the current will bring them back to mix into expired dough, rotting under the grandfather clock 2 hours behind. That night I dreamt of midnight curls, braided with red ribbon, the lullabies sang to me in foreign tongue, explained again and again for me to forget verse 1. Close my eyes, inhale the scent of chopped jasmine sinking in oolong tea. Spill it into scorched grass and wonder why they died. I like to think I'm Nirwa's daughter. Mud sculpted into flawless nose, ethereal eyes. She sweeps me across continents to a quiet village of persimmons and firewood. I find solace through dipping brushes in century-old ink. Write calligraphy of crooked lines, glass tears. Pretend to be the girl I saw yesterday and hope no one else knows. I'm told regret only exists if I don't try to piece the fragments of myself together. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Sophia.
Hello, I'm Sophia Brooks, and I have Ode to Bolognese, the pasta sauce. No one believes me when I say pasta is a beautiful thing, especially the kind from a navy blue cardboard box from the supermarket down the road. Often, when the afternoon draws out long and my mother's Earl Grey tea grows cold in her mug, my dad decides enough is enough and it should be dinner time. He pulls out the Instant Pot and tells me to cut, slice, mince, carrots, celery, onion, and the scent of crushed garlic and frying pancetta starts to waft out of the kitchen while he stirs 2 cans of crushed tomatoes, 1 can of tomato paste, a cup of broth, and a splash of red wine from the wine cooler that's next to the glass cabinet that I check my reflection in, more and more visible each time we make bolognese. My father slips the noodles in the pot, dry and crackly, peeking out under the lid. After the bubbles roll and submerge the noodles, they warm and become flexible, creatures that slip and swim through the boiling water. I reel one in with a fork and clamp down my jaws, testing if they're al dente yet. When they're perfect, I strain them in a colander that I first peer at my kitchen through a wholly new perspective. Oh, to take what we love and purely devour it, as the best part about cooking is the eating afterwards. When the savory flavors coat our tongues and fill our senses, I know that my contributions to my dad's cooking truly do pay off. It's wonderful knowing that you can create something so satiating and beautiful, the way that the sauce cascades over the center of the dish, painting the plate red. And yet, nobody believes me when I say that the olive oil truly shimmers, or that the tomatoes glow when the broth and wine spill over them, or that the recipe never changes, but the sauce tastes different every time, as if life has added its own parsley, crushed tomatoes, Parmesan along the way. Thank you.
And last but not least, Sebastian.
Hi, I'm Sebastian Gonzalez. I wrote this poem in my freshman year English class. Shout out Miss Brown. This is Ode to Peeling Oranges. Digging nails through rough, living skin, tearing towards the succulent, yearning flesh beneath. A patchwork of sinew, a calloused organism, a bird lying in my palm shedding feathers. And aren't we like birds? Us with our false layers of splendor that can be peeled away as easily as thumbing back an orange, and whether opened carefully or not, will shed in a vicious spiral or broken, shattered, and shall the beautiful flesh of life of oranges that gives me such happiness to taste rot away, is the reward for labor not sweetness.
That's great. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Any comments, questions? You guys are awesome. Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Special
Appreciate
thanks to Mr. Remley for helping to organize our students being here tonight. And again, Amy is a senior. Sophia and Sebastian are both sophomores. And all 3 of them confirmed they will be reading original poetry on Thursday night at the Poetry Fest, along with many of their peers. So thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great night. All right, moving on. Comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker, with a maximum of 15 on each subject. Anybody like to approach the board? All right, seeing there are none, we'll move on to reports and recognition with a Literacy Academy update.
Mr. Tesber.
It is with great pleasure that I introduce Bob Rousseau, the Special Education Administrator for the elementary schools, and Jen Tavello, who is a special ed teacher and our Orton Gillingham Fellow. Together over the last 3 years, they've done an amazing job with the implementation of the Literacy Academy. And they're here tonight to give the board an update on how that implementation is going and to talk a little bit about what the future holds for us.
Hello, everyone. There's nothing I can say that's going to match what was just written and read, so we're just going to do our best and see how it goes. But we're very excited to offer an update on the Literacy Academy for our 3rd year in a row here. At this point, from a staffing perspective, the Literacy Academy is fully implemented. We have the staff that we sought out to get, and we believe the results have been outstanding, as I think you'll see soon. We know this doesn't happen without the Board of Education support and the cabinet support that we've received, so we want to thank you all for that. So from an outline perspective today, we'll be discussing what structured literacy is, the purpose of the Literacy Academy, our continuum of services, teacher training, student data, and the plan moving forward. But first, we have some very important people here, our dedicated Literacy Academy instructors, at least 2 of them. These are the people who serve as our boots on the ground. They're the people who work with students who have reading disabilities and dyslexia and help them progress. And really, they're just the people that make it happen. So when I call on them, if they could just stand so you can see who these great professionals are. I'm going to start with the one who's not here, but she's doing an outstanding job, which is Jane Munson at West School. Then we have Brett Castle at East School and Caitlin Portanova at South School. So we want to thank them for their efforts. They're doing an outstanding job, as I think you'll see. So at this point, we're going to have Jen come up and discuss our structured literacy and what it is, and then I'll come back to talk about the purpose of the Literacy Academy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Tavello. I'm a fellow with the Orton Gillingham Academy, and I'm going to talk to you about structured literacy. So when we think about reading, sometimes, right, we want to think about all of the components. And there was a lot of research done by the National Reading Panel in year 2000 actually came out. It was one of the biggest studies that studied how the brain learned to read. And they came up with these 5 big areas of reading. So it's phonemic awareness, which is the smallest unit of sound, manipulating that. So not even seeing letters, or really starting at that sound level. And then phonics is where you put the sound and the symbol together. The letter and the sound go together, and that's how we blend and read words. Then once you're accurate and automatic, you can be fluent. And that's that reading fluency piece. Then when you're reading words, the purpose is application, right? To learn new things. And that's comprehension and then also vocabulary. So those are 5 big areas of reading. So that's what we focus on during our reading instruction. So what is structured literacy? When we think about the study that was done, we think about all the components of reading. And structured literacy is actually trademarked by the International Dyslexia Organization, the IDA. And what's really interesting about it is it took all this research and all of these studies, and it determined that to have sound reading instruction, we really need to make sure that we're teaching all 5 areas of reading. So the phonological awareness piece, the phonics with the sound symbol, the comprehension, which covers the syntax and the semantics, the meaning, and we have morphology as well, which is the smallest unit of meaning. And how do we do that? So they have some suggestions, and some of that is the systematic approach. So working from simple to more complex, always spiraling back what you've learned previously, that cumulative review. The explicit instruction, and then being diagnostic as well. So those pieces come together to make that structured literacy approach. So you might be thinking, like, how does Orton Gillingham fit in? So Dr. Samuel Orton and Anna Gillingham collaborated together actually in 1938, around then, in the late 30s and early 40s. And they came together and they were using this approach. So the IDA recognizes Orton Gillingham as a structured literacy approach because it actually existed before the idea of the structured literacy lesson. And in the past, when I've spoken to you, we've showed you little clips of students doing parts of the lessons with our teachers. Today, what I wanted to show you is what a lesson plan looks like, a whole lesson plan, because we're implementing these components of a structured literacy lesson, and then also making sure that we're putting in these components of multisensory approach. They're systematic and explicit and diagnostic as well. So here's an example, and I'm just going to zoom in a little, of an Orton Gillingham lesson. And we're not going to go into extreme detail about it, but I just wanted to show you how it builds upon itself. So it starts at the sounds level. And if you notice, the teacher is writing on the side the diagnostic notes. So when you have a structured literacy program, a lot of times you'll get a book a teacher's guide, and the teacher's guide will say, okay, we're going to teach lesson 1 today, and after you teach lesson 1, you're going to teach lesson 2. And it has all the components of a structured literacy lesson, and it's explicit and it's direct. But what's really special about Orton Gillingham is it's not a program, it's an approach. And so what that means is there's no teacher's guide. What we do is we teach the teacher with extensive training, which you know. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second, to have the knowledge to say, okay, here's my lesson. My student made these mistakes. I have to be diagnostic. Why did they make this mistake? And now what's the prescription? How am I going to address this mistake tomorrow in my lesson to help fill this gap for the student? So that's really what we're thinking about. I can just go through this. So really, it's cumulative, so it's building on themselves. There's concepts that are not as complex, and then there's concepts that are more complex. It's all going to depend on what the student knows and the errors that the students made previously. We have reading, we have spelling. And when we teach something new, I just want to highlight this before I move on. When we teach something new, we're really explicit and direct. We use the guided discovery model where we use all of the senses. The student is hearing the sound, they're seeing the sound, and then they're using a simultaneous multisensory approach to tracing the sound, but they're not, or tracing the letter that makes the sound, but we're never having them guess. We're giving them all that information, everything they need to know about the concept in order to be successful.
Okay, I'm back. So to talk about the purpose of the Literacy Academy. So it's to improve the literacy skills of special education students by providing them with intensive, scientifically based instruction by highly qualified special education teachers dedicated to teaching reading under the direction of an OG fellow. So some of the things that makes what we are doing special are that we have an instructional leader in Jen overseeing implementation. You know, as an OG fellow, her expertise is highly unique in any school, really, public or otherwise. We have the ongoing instructional coaching and professional development. We think that's crucial. And we have highly skilled and effective teachers dedicated to teaching reading. You know, the dedicated part, where they have mostly a singular focus on reading, is really extremely valuable and rare. I think it's one of the things that makes us so expert at what we're doing. So this slide represents the continuum of services that we provide from a literacy academy and really just a literacy perspective. You know, also the branches of what we're doing here. Later we'll talk about coursework and the practicum it takes to get where we are trying to go from a training perspective here. But we see our OG fellow providing coaching, modeling, and training for not only our literacy academy teachers, but also for the special education teachers as a whole. After all, she's provided a significant amount of training for our entire team already. And in addition, we're making great strides towards having multiple associate level trained staff members in each building. We see collaboration and consultation in every direction, so that's great. So whether a literacy academy is right for an individual student or not, we have the ability to individualize plans for students with staff who still have an understanding of the OG framework, which we really think is just crucial and valuable. So entrance into the Literacy Academy. So there's really two avenues for this. One is through data from testing, and the other is through more of a response to intervention kind of format. So in terms of testing, anytime we might suspect a student requires special education services, we engage in what's called an initial evaluation. In addition, students who are already receiving services get reevaluated every 3 years. And when we look at the data or using that testing, we focus on the following data when considering whether a student is a good match for Literacy Academy. So we look at reading, decoding, and identifying data, pseudo-word decoding, so that's your ability to read a nonsense word, can you sound it out? Phonological processing, rapid naming, oral reading fluency, and cognitive testing. So, and then there's the other avenue, right, which is, it's a special education teacher referral, but it's really based on how a student is responding to the intervention that we have in place already. And when there are concerns with that, you know, some of the data we'll look at are DIBELS data, phonological awareness data, and single word reading data, One of the main focus points of the Literacy Academy, right, is reading accuracy. So you'll kind of see that brought up several times as we go through. So exiting the Literacy Academy. So we have also had students exit the Literacy Academy. We'll talk about that in a moment, which is great because that's the goal, right, to move forward in that manner. What are we looking for when we make this kind of a recommendation? Students who are working at the advanced phoneme level and have mastered basic phonological awareness, students who are accurate readers with grade level text, and students who meet grade level expectations for single word reading. So this slide just goes into how our numbers have changed in the Literacy Academy. The two things to pay attention to are that they've gone up every year, and that'll slow as we keep going, which was expected. And the second part, of course, as we spoke about earlier, is that we've had students exit the Literacy Academy. And this year, of course, we'll have more, and we'll have that number for you later in the year. So to start, when we talk about OG training levels, I think what's important to note is it's a significant undertaking for staff. It's really a lot of work. And there are 3 certification levels. So one is the classroom educator. That's 30 hours of coursework and 50 hours of supervised practicum. The associate level, next step up, 70 hours of coursework and 100 hours of supervised practicum. And then that final step, the certified level, is 100 hours of coursework and 200 hours of supervised practicum. That's what our Literacy Academy instructors here are working towards right now. In terms of where we are with our staff training, so all of our Literacy Academy teachers are associate level, working towards certified level. From a K through 4 special education teacher perspective, we think it's great that 89% of our special education teachers at that level have successfully completed the associate level coursework. And then a district-wide level, including non-special education staff, so like specialists and things like that, we have 7 classroom educator teachers, 11 associate level teachers, and 2 certified teachers. You know, and finally, during the last 2 presentations, we brought quotes from parents on how the Literacy Academy had positively impacted their children. We still have those kinds of communications regularly, happens all the time. However, this time we thought we would offer some teacher quotes to convey how their work with OG has positively impacted their practice. So, you've changed my view on teaching reading, writing, and spelling. I only wish I had learned the OG approach years ago. Those who know better, do better. I feel like this goes for teachers teaching students and students too. If they know more, they will do better and be better humans. And then the last one, I feel like I'm actually teaching students to read for the first time in my 15-year career. I have students who struggled with CVC words when I started with them a year ago, who are now reading multisyllabic words. Celebrating their progress from year to year has given me a new sense of accomplishment. So that's my part in the presentation. Jen's going to come on up and finish off and talk about student progress, and then we'll take questions. Thank you so much.
So when we think about our students, we want to look at, of course, monitor the progress that they're making. So one way that we do that is using the PAST assessment. The PAST assessment looks at phonological skills. So when I talk about the phonemic awareness piece of the reading chart and hearing the sounds, that's really the first step to learning to read, is being able to manipulate those sounds. So the PAST assessment looks at the basic syllable level, onset and rhyme, the advanced phoneme level, and it goes to the advanced phoneme level. So as you see, this is the average, the average of these scores, and our students are doing a really nice job. They're making progress. You really have to master the side, like the left side of the chart, before you move to the right. And so you have to get that basic syllable level down before you can move to the advanced phoneme level. We also really look at that single word reading. So like Bob said, this is going to come up throughout the presentation, because when we think about the definition of dyslexia from the Orton-Gillingham or from the International Dyslexia Association, and then our state of Connecticut definition, the definition involves single word reading. That's because a lot of our students with dyslexia or with reading disabilities have a hard time connecting those letters and the sounds and seeing phonics patterns in words. So when you take the word out of context and you give them a word, whether it's a real word or a nonsense word, and this assessment assesses both, that's where we start to see the breakdown for our students that we work with. So we also see some really great improvements here. So again, starting at the left, the closed syllables, those are more basic words, like the word sud is a closed syllable. And then our multisyllabic words, it becomes much more advanced. This assessment is used even with adults. When you go into the OG world, they use this GE test of coding all the way up for adults. And some of the words on the multisyllabic section are like horticulture, things like that, that we're expecting the student to be able to break down the syllables and read those words. So that was the average. So the question becomes, what does progress look like for an individual student? So this student I wanted to highlight, and this is what I've shown in years past when I've come to the board. So when you look up at the slide, you see that on the left-hand side of the chart, the more basic skills, this student is receiving 100% accuracy, and you're kind of thinking, okay, like he's doing really well. But this is his second year in the Literacy Academy. So if we go to this slide, you can see his data over the course of 2 school years. And so if you look at his data beginning in September 2023, you can see that those scores were lower than at the beginning of this year because he retained that information. He was able to read those words that he wasn't able to read in the beginning of the intervention with the Literacy Academy. You do see a little dip, and that was that summer data point. So between June and September, like all of our students, sometimes we have a little bit, but we jump right back up when we look at our November data point. That average goes right back to where it was. And here's that same data just shown in a different format. As you can see, that pink reddish line trending upward, that's our trend line, and you can see that across our data is trending in the right direction. So it's really exciting to see that over the course of the 2 years, the student is really making progress, and they're maintaining that progress and then continuing on to more complex skills. So here's a second example. This is a 4th grade student. She's been in the Literacy Academy for 3 years. She's been in the academy since the implementation. And if you look here, her chart is a little bit different. When she first started in grade 2 in the Literacy Academy, we're diagnostic and prescriptive, we're individualized, like I showed you on that lesson plan. So we really were working on CVC words or closed single consonant words like sud with her in March, March of 2023. And then as her lessons have gone on, as her instruction has gone on, the concepts have been able to get more complex, and you see more bars appear on this graph, and you see her data trending upwards. So not only is she increasing her skills, but she's increasing the complexity of the skills and the words she's able to decode because she's learning more and retaining what she's learned and able to apply it. And here's the same data shown on a graph with the dotted line being the trend line. So again, trending upwards, she's maintaining what she's learned, and more complex skills are being added into her lesson plans, working from simple to complex, always reviewing and being cumulative. So this is what it looks like on a chart for an individual student over multiple years. How does that translate to an OG lesson? So on the left is a sample of the text the student was reading in her OG lesson when she began the instruction in 2nd grade. It's a simple text. There's some consonant blends or 2 letters together. There's CVC words. But now on the right, in 4th grade, this is the kind of text that she's reading. And there's a lot more complexities in that text. So you really can see the difference, how the student has grown as a reader due to her time in the Literacy Academy. And it's hard to think about grade level text when we're thinking about an OG lesson because everything is really individualized. But when we put this text on the right into a text complexity like calculator, it does come out at a 4th grade level now. And she's a 4th grade student, which is really exciting. We also have our DIVLS data on this same student. So DIVLS is really hard to compare year to year because the text complexity changes every year. So in the beginning of 1st grade, when you're asked to read a passage, you're looking at an end of 1st grade text. And then in 2nd grade, you're looking at an end of 2nd grade text. And so you can't compare the end of 1st grade's accuracy to beginning of 2nd grade because the text is more complex. But if you look across the years here, and I have that little rectangle that says when she began Literacy Academy in grade 2, you can see that the student is becoming more and more accurate as the instruction goes on, to the point where she made the expectation with a 3rd grade text. In 4th grade, at the beginning of the year, at a 4th grade passage, she read the text with 90% accuracy. 96 was the goal, and then she made the goal by the middle of the year. If you compare her beginning of the year data points, again, it's tricky to compare across years, but she had in 1st grade, she read the text with 0% accuracy at the beginning of the year. In the beginning of 2nd grade, it was 50%. In the beginning of 3rd grade, 55%. And the beginning of 4th grade, 90%. So as Bob said, we chose to highlight some of the teachers, but not all the student growth is seen in the data. We get some really lovely parent emails and some really happy parents who let us know, that they see the progress at home too. It's not just the charts and the graphs and the lines on the data points, and it's not just in isolation in the classroom setting. So one of the parents said, I want to let you know that this weekend the student started sneaking out of her room and hiding in the closet with a light, reading her pug book. I listened outside her door and she's really making sense. Getting her to read was a pain, but now she's progressing and doing it all on her own. They said empirically, the student is now saying that her favorite subject is reading. And from my perspective, it's like a fog, a cloud has started to clear, and she's connecting the dots. Thank you for all that you're doing. We have a little note, too, from one of our students that wrote for one of our teachers, too. So we think about the Literacy Academy. We think about 2 potential next steps. So the first one is already in motion. So we've applied for accreditation through the Orton Gillingham Academy. So currently there is only 18 accredited instructional programs worldwide. We're the first public school to ever apply for OGA accreditation. And when I was just at the conference in Kentucky in the beginning of the month, they were using New Canaan as an example that public schools can make it work and do it the right way to meet our students' needs. And then the other thing to think about is potentially expanding from K4 through grade 5. So that's our presentation. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll take questions.
Thank you for the presentation and the amazing work. I particularly love the end and saying that we're the first public school to apply. I guess the first question is, are we using what we're learning through the Literacy Academy and OG in other areas of instruction? And if so, how are we doing that? And the second is, it's probably a broader question. Do we have funding to offer these services during the summer like we do with other services, other special ed services? Thanks.
Yeah, so I think in terms of reading, all the special ed teachers are getting the OG training. So all of the special ed teachers are using the OG approach. It's really fun to go into different classrooms, not the Literacy Academy teachers, but the special ed teachers' classrooms, and see things that they've learned from their training, up on their wall, or things that they're implementing. But are you asking like in terms of like math or like writing, other subject areas?
Yeah, really outside special ed. So just, typical reading in our elementary schools, excuse me. Are we using what we're, learning through OG in our, regular classroom work?
Yeah. I would say absolutely. IEPs are very comprehensive kinds of documents, but it's not just about the IEP. But what we do know is we have, and it's all individualized, right? But in every situation, what we're trying to do is get at that generalization in all those different kinds of classes. So whether it's consulting with the regular education teacher to make sure they know what that student's working on, or teaching assistants in there supporting that happening, in all different kinds of ways, I think we're absolutely seeing that, and we're constantly getting feedback from the teachers that they're seeing the effects of what we're doing with the student in Orton Gillingham lessons. So I think it's a great question. You also asked about summer, right? And so at all of our PPT meetings, one of the questions that is asked and answered, right, is there a need for ESY, Extended School Year Services. And, you know, we don't always have all of our staff there, but we have a really significant amount of special education staff. And as you've seen, a lot of them are well-trained, right? So we absolutely continue that when it's appropriate for students over the summer, you know, in terms of OG lessons and things like that. And we're really fortunate at this time, maybe not when I first started here, but now that we have a lot of people that really can follow through on those kinds of things over the summer, and so it's exciting.
I would just add, Brendan, that the reading specialists across the elementary schools are all trained in OG, and we're actually going to run a refresher for some of our reading specialists this spring as well. So we are trying to expand the reach of Wharton Gillingham. And the other programs that we use in the general education classes in the elementary schools, the Foundations program and the Haggerty, they're all OG based. Everything is based on the OG approach.
And I'll just add that any new teacher that comes in and is teaching in the primary grades goes through Foundations and Haggerty training. So many of them will take that training actually in the summertime so that they'll be able to start right in the fall with all the other teachers on that grade level to implement the Haggerty program if they're in kindergarten and first grade, or the Foundations program if they're in second and third grade. And they're just able to pick it right up.
Matt, please.
So just kind of piggybacking off of that, so how many hours are required to reach the associate level?
So it's a 70-hour course, and then after the coursework is done, it's a 100-hour practicum. So the practicum is working with student under the supervision of the fellow, which is me.
And how long does that typically take to complete?
Yeah, so the minimum is actually 8 months. There's an 8-month minimum. And so really, a lot of times, it takes longer than 8 months because of field trips and, you know, vacations and things like that. It really depends on the practicum student and how often the teacher is seeing the student.
And do we, I guess it says 89% of the special ed teachers have successfully completed, associate level coursework. Do we require them to eventually complete associate level, and sort of what?
It's not a strict requirement because some teachers are working with the population that this isn't relevant for. But we want the majority of the special education teachers. It's one of the things that we put on, you know, the job descriptions now when we have an opening, that we want them to complete the Wharton Gillingham training.
Who would it not be relevant for? Just help me understand.
For students who the OG approach isn't appropriate for them, they may have more complex needs, and this
Okay,
isn't
gotcha.
the right way to approach reading for them. There's different methodologies that we can use for those students.
Understood. And then I guess, you know, to your point, I mean, what incentives are in place to, you know, to incentivize people to either reach to certified teacher level, go beyond the associate level, and what incentives are in place, I guess, to retain the 2 certified teachers that we have? It seems like it's pretty highly sought after, so.
Yeah, it is. Incentives, you know, I think a lot of it is really a love of what they're doing. There's no formal incentive to get teachers to do this. But what they do appreciate, and I'm sure they can speak to it, is the joy and pride that they see in the progress of the kids that they're working with. So, you know, it's more of an internal incentive for that.
You sound like Darlene, just selling incentive to future employees. You gotta love the place, right? I mean, a little more. Yeah, are there sort of career incentives, I guess, other than sort of like?
Not per se inside the school district, but you know, this is a skill that is you know, something that's highly sought after. So it opens up doors for teachers to do other things as well as teach.
To do it, like, I guess I'm thinking about it from a retention perspective, right? Like, that was my point about Darlene. I mean, I know she sells the new Canaan dream to prospective employees, but I think every day, if there's, I don't know, it just seems like if it's that sort of,
Sure.
if that's sought after, like, if in just to encourage more teachers to undertake, I mean, that's a lot of hours,
Yes.
right? To undertake
It's a lot of
that
work.
beyond sort of what the minimum requirement is, and also obviously to retain those who have chosen to do that and put forth that effort. It seems like we want to retain those. And then just a couple other questions on, I guess, some of the numbers of the students there. So I noticed from 22 and 23 to the 23-24 school year, we've seen quite a significant increase from 12 to 21, and that's on a net basis. So I think it's actually more because 5 students actually exited, right? So what what can we sort of, what can we gather or understand from this increase? Do we understand sort of
Yeah, so what happened
there?
was is that the first year of implementation, we had 1.5 teachers in the Literacy Academy because we were slowly implementing it in phases. And then we had 2.5 teachers. And so because we had another half a teacher, we were able to get more students, to reach more students.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it was a pilot that we ran with the ESSER money, and then we phased it in.
Perfect. And then, I guess, do we know where, is there any sort of information in the data as to where these students, where they are, I guess, in which schools or which grades, and sort of where, can we identify weaknesses, right? Like in sort of the data as to where, because some, obviously, people have, you know, learning disabilities and different complexities and ways of learning, but also, you know, is there any information to be gathered, or are there variables that come into play that the data sort of points to? Perhaps there's some sort of commonality in whether it's COVID, whether it's a specific classroom that they had in first grade or second grade, or what, can we gather any sort of more specific data to identify where these weaknesses are, or is it just completely random?
Yeah, well, a lot of times we're talking about students that have dyslexia. So dyslexia is a really common learning disability. You know, depending on how you define dyslexia, some people even say it's 1 in 5. And so sometimes if you have dyslexia, you might be able to get what you need in a general education classroom. You might just need reading support, you know, go through the tiers, or you might need intensive support through something through the Literacy Academy. So it's not really as much as, you know, finding a trend. It's really trying to identify the students that need the intensive support and then providing it with them with the daily OG instruction. So that's really more of the trend that we're trying to find is, like, who is the student and what support do they need to be successful?
No, I understand, and I completely appreciate that. I guess I was just wondering if, as we see this jump and as it grows and as we're able to take in more students, can we identify gaps in instruction, maybe at certain levels? I will, you know, my now 5th grader, he was in 3rd grade, wonderful teacher at South School, Ms. Nicholas. I'm going to shout out, she's one of my favorite teachers, but anyway. Remember that, Darlene and Brian. But just kidding. But, you know, I remember she reached out and identified there were some weaknesses, right, with my son, right? And I think that was based on some previous years that he had, right? And I don't know if, as we start to identify and work with more students, if we can identify where sort of they went off course. Obviously, dyslexia is very specific and it's, you know, unique to each student. But is there something that we can identify in our instruction, in sort of in our staffing, and just sort of in, you know, that we can identify where the problems sort of may have started, right? I think that would kind of be next level. I don't know if that's even, I appreciate why that's not on your radar, right? Because it's very sort of specific and it's very random, but it would be interesting to see if data sort of suggests that there's a gap somewhere at one of these schools or elsewhere, right? And then I guess my final question would be, do we have any sense of how many students are going to exit this year? How many have already met the benchmark to exit for this year, of these 22 that are currently there?
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I mean, I'm not sure of an exact number at this point, and it could change too, right? Because we're always looking at the data, continually refining it. So I am aware of a few, but I'd be hesitant to throw out a number to you, just because I'm not sure if it'll be accurate or not, but we do see exits certainly on the horizon. And we're constantly looking also at our criteria and whether we, you know, open it up a little bit or not, and we want to always be looking at adding an appropriate amount of students and still remembering that the most important thing and the thing we've had success with is effectiveness, right? And so those small groups and those appropriately managed groups are so important, but we don't have the exact number, but we know there's people coming.
Perfect, thank you very much.
And Matt, just to respond to your question, so we did notice some patterns in our data a few years ago, which is why we implemented the Haggerty program in kindergarten and first grade.
Gotcha.
We had noticed some gaps in our phonological awareness, and Haggerty is completely all about phonological awareness. It's how you hear the sounds, how you manipulate the sounds. So we were beginning our instruction in kindergarten and first grade with foundations, and we recognized that we need to backtrack a little bit. There is lessons in foundation that deal with phonological awareness, but there weren't a significant amount of lessons. And so that's why we introduced Haggerty, because it really dives deeply into that phonological awareness. And so we do spend time in both kindergarten and first grade implementing that program and assessing the kids. And that's kind of a warning sign when you start to see that a child's not making progress on the Haggerty, you start to see those red flags going off. And that's when you start to consult with a reading specialist who then might start working with children, and then they'll start consulting with special ed. So that's our whole response to intervention.
Gotcha.
And then we also have data teams on the foundation data. So we look at all of the kids are assessed in the Haggerty. They're assessed when they finish a foundations unit to see did they make progress and learn the material that was taught within that unit. And then 3 times a year, they're given the dibbles. And that's in K1, 2, 3. And that allows us to track it over time and hopefully pick up children that are not making the progress, not making it in general ed, making that referral over to special ed, and then letting the magical team jump in to help those kids too.
Gotcha, that's perfect. And when did that start, I guess?
So we've been giving the Dibbles data assessment for about 3 or 4 years now.
Okay.
So, so we have some really good tracking of that data. The Foundations program we've been using for a significant amount of time, and then we've now implemented the Haggerty, and that's been about 3 years as well. So we're really able to track that data, and we send those reports home. We actually have to still mail them because we can't figure out an electronic way to do that through student ID numbers, and it's not our fault, it's the company's fault. So we mail those. And actually, just about a month ago, we did a parent presentation because the kindergartners were getting their data for the first time. And it was amazing because we did the timing where the letters went home in the mail, and then we did the presentation the week after. And so the parents actually showed up with their reports. And so we went through how you read that report, and then we stuck around at the end so they could go up and have individual conversations with a reading specialist at the school to really dive deeply into the data that they had.
Perfect.
The only other last thing I would add is, if what Jill described is the RTI process. And when we're talking about students who enter into the Literacy Academy, you're more likely to find correlations around a genetic link to dyslexia than anything else, as opposed to East School, West School, South School. It's not that. It's a genetic,
Dyslexia, yeah.
contributing factor that's going to be, okay, these are the kids who are more likely than not to need the intensive support.
And we do ask those questions
Yeah.
in registration and in pre-K data,
Yep.
if there's any family history.
Yeah, we
And
added
that
those in the
also
last
helps
couple of
us to flag that data.
Perfect. No, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, thank you guys for coming back. Building off Matt's question around the students that we're taking, are we at a point where we are able to take immediately all students who qualify? Or is there any sort of delay because of the capacity that we have to serve students right now? And then also building on that, you talked about possibly expanding the criteria, and what would that look like?
So just to make sure I understand the question, when you say qualify, you mean more like for the Literacy Academy criteria I spoke to, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we are at this point able to do that. We haven't missed, to my knowledge, once on that, so yeah. In terms of, are we at a point where we could potentially expand? It's one of those balancing acts I think I was kind of referring to before, where I think we can. We feel like we could take more students. And so we're looking at you always want to be very specific when you're starting a program with what your criteria is, right? Because if you're not, then you don't know what changed or what to change. And so we're starting to look at, looking at scores a little bit differently, seeing if we can open it up some. We would do that slowly and methodically, because we want to make sure, again, that effectiveness is there, so that we always want to stay 4 or less in terms of our groups. But it's also important, the kind of group that you have, to the student's success, right? So we wouldn't want to have somebody at the beginning levels of phonological awareness in there with somebody who's about to exit, right? Because that would just, make it quite challenging. That said, our instructors are outstanding at individualizing an Orton Gillingham lesson. I've seen it so many times. So we're looking at expanding and maybe opening up the criteria a little bit, but again, in a methodical way, so we don't open it up too far and have to draw back.
That makes sense. And then, because we now have a teacher dedicated at each one of the schools, is that teacher responsible for both the delivery and also all of the testing that is happening for the students over the course of the year? And I ask that because we sometimes see, in some of those examples, a dip at one point or another, and that could be a summer, experience, but it also could have been a different person administering. And so I was just wondering if that's a factor, or is it always the same individual doing the delivery as well as the assessment?
Yeah, so for the most part, it's the same individual doing the delivery of the assessment. So all of our Literacy Academy teachers take that progress monitoring data. And the reason why they take the data themselves is because it really tells you, did the student hesitate? Did the student make a self-correction? All of those things are data, right? It tells us how to respond. And I think in terms of, sometimes there is a little bit of a dip, and you're right, a lot of times it might be after summer. Other times, what's interesting is when the student learns another sound. I was at a school today, and the student had gotten the word plow right on an assessment before, like they read it correctly, and now they learned that OW says O, so they read it as plow. But last time when they took the assessment, they didn't know the second sound for OW. So as they get later on in the scope and sequence, there's more choices you have to make. You have to be more flexible with your sounds, with your spelling. And so sometimes that's what happens, is that they learn more, and then all of a sudden there's a little dip because you're like, oh my gosh, like now I know, is it plow or is it plow? And so that's sometimes what happens.
Great. And then I was also interested in, you described possible expansion to grade 5 and how the current model could be adapted and expanded, and would it look any different in 5th grade than it does in the elementaries?
We have a teacher at the intermediate school who is associate level trained and going for her certified level training. So we have the person there. So in essence, it would be a very similar format in terms of the requirements for the entrance and exit criteria, the group sizes, all of that. Again, it's to Bob's point, we're trying to be very methodical and making sure that we're making the right steps at the right time with this process. And as we look towards accreditation, in the future in terms of schools, does it make sense to have a K-5, literacy academy that's OG, certified or accredited?
Great. And now that we've been building the program for a couple of years, is there, or at what point would we potentially be able to see kind of a cohort level analysis of, before we had the program, this is, and I know that as I say this, COVID is a factor and there's always going to be differences, but just the concept of before this program, this is what it looked like for certain groups of students, and now with the program, we can kind of see a little bit of evidence of the difference. I'm wondering at what point we might be able to see that in like SBAC data or like other sorts of testing that we do.
The thing with the SBAC data is a lot of our students have accommodations, and so it's challenging sometimes to compare apples to apples. Sometimes if you're a student with dyslexia, depending on individuals, you might have some of the text questions read to you, or you might have accommodations to help you with that. We did look at that. I did pull the SBAC data for the Literacy Academy students, and I did do and they were averaging a 3 across all schools for 3rd and 4th grade, the average score. So that's the goal, is 3. So that was great to see. I'm not sure if there's another way to compile that data, but I can definitely think about it. I think it'd be really interesting to see.
Great. Thank you.
So we've spoken a fair amount about dyslexia tonight. Can you talk about some of the other issues that some Literacy Academy kids have and how prevalent those issues are? Like, how do all these things kind of break down in terms of the Literacy Academy? Like, what percentage are dyslexic? What percentage have other things going on?
Yeah, so for the most part, the majority of the students in the Literacy Academy are identified on their IEP under the category specific learning disability or specific learning disability / dyslexia. Really, the students that are in the Literacy Academy, typically reading is their biggest area of weakness for the most part. And some difficulties that they have is usually in phonological awareness, so hearing the sounds, single word reading, which is matching the letters and the sounds, decoding the words accurately. And we talked a lot about accuracy because a lot of times our students are really working on the accuracy and they need to get that down before they can be more automatic. A lot of our students might have weaknesses in rapid automatic naming, which means that they're going to be reading slower. And that's a typical trait of a dyslexic student. Sally Shaywitz, who wrote the book Overcoming Dyslexia, says the biggest gift we can give our dyslexic students is the gift of time. And so sometimes even like the DIVLS assessment is really challenging when we're thinking about a kid with dyslexia because it's a timed assessment. But for the most part, it's really areas of reading are the weaknesses, whether it's because of their rate, their slow pace, it's because of their phonological awareness deficits, it's because they struggle with patterns when they're connecting letters and sounds. In terms of a cognitive profile, this is very generalized, but a lot of times students with dyslexia have a weakness in working memory or a weakness in processing speed and strengths in other areas.
Thank you. And second question, and sort of piggybacking on what Matt was asking about before, the breakdown in terms of grade, do you have that kind of off the top of your head? Is there anything to glean from that?
Yeah, so typically what happens is the majority of our students are in grades 2, 3, and 4 for the most part. And then as they move through the grades, the cohort gets larger because the students typically will stay in and more students will be added. And that's typically how it works in special education as well. I was a grade 3 special education teacher for years at South School, and that always seemed to be, sometimes that was the year when the rubber hit the road and the kids were being identified into special education. So that's when we're, looking at those students, we're doing evaluations, and we're determining whether they'd be a good fit for the Literacy Academy. We do have some things in place to try to, identify these students sooner. So like the DIVLS has been in place for a few years now, which is a great universal screener. We also have the question that we added to the preschool screener and the registration form, does dyslexia run in your family? Because, there is a genetic element to dyslexia.
And you led me perfectly to my final question, which was, where do we expect these numbers to go? If we have this information, DIBBLs, all this kind of stuff, where are we getting to? It's obviously growing. How much more can it grow?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know that we have the exact answer to it, but I would say, we're always thinking about, again, that it's not so much we're thinking about the number we'll grow to. We keep thinking about, one, making sure Literacy Academy is right for the student. Second, making sure we stay in those numbers. And third, making sure we have appropriately placed groups. But somebody asked before, we have, in all cases, in terms of our criteria, we've been able to handle all of those students who met the criteria every single time. So, and we're working with them now.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. I just have a quick question or clarification about the staffing. So as you're looking or wanting to expand into the intermediate school, and you said that we have an associate trained to be a certified, does that mean, would it require additional headcount, or do we have the teachers already that we could implement that without bringing on new staffing?
There would be no additional headcount. We have the staffing to do that.
Okay, great. And does it require additional funding or budget? No.
Nope, it's all in place. It's just a matter of making that, taking the next step.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the hours, the supervised hours, you're supervising all of the hours? So you have 11 associates and you said 80-something% are trying to become certified, and they have to do all of their supervised hours through you?
Yes.
So that as we have more who want to be certified, it slows
Yes.
down. Right.
Yes.
And then the 2 certified teachers that we currently have, are they at the same school, or is there a goal to have a certified teacher in each program, like at each elementary school? And
Yeah, so our goal would be to have our Literacy Academy teachers at the certified level. And we actually have 2 certified teachers who are not literacy academy teachers who are in our schools, and we have 3 teachers that are going for certified currently. So we have a lot of teachers that are interested and they want to learn more, and they're trying to keep working on their certification.
Great. And then my final question is, do you know off the top of your head, or just a ballpark, how many of the students who you recommend the summer program, the extended school year, how many end up taking that, like taking that opportunity and doing the school program?
So I don't have an exact number on that. I can tell you that the majority of kids that we recommend for ESY do go to ESY.
Okay.
You know, it's an interesting thing over the summer that people go on vacations and things like that, so they might miss a week here or there. But overall, the majority of students who are recommended for it do go.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
This program is wonderful. So the scores are amazing. I guess the easy question first. Applying for the accreditation for the school, what does that mean
Yeah.
versus what we have now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Oregon-Gillingham Academy is an accrediting and certifying body. And so what they do is they want to make sure before they put their, academy stamp, their gold seal of approval on your program, is that you're meeting the expectations of their program. So I'm actually on the accreditation committee for the Oregon-Gillingham Academy. And so some of the things that we look for when we go out to these sites and these schools is, number one, that your staff is trained in the OG approach, right? So we have that the students are grouped appropriately, that you're following OG with fidelity, right? So that lesson plan that I showed you, that's being made up every single day for the students that the teachers are working with. They're being diagnostic and prescriptive. They're following the OG principles. They're individualized. It's cumulative. It's direct and explicit. So how that process works is we applied for accreditation. We did our initial primary application. The committee is actually going to discuss it next Monday night. Then they'll assign us a mentor. The mentor will be someone on the committee. They'll come out, they'll visit, they'll observe, and then over that, it's going to take a year process of that mentorship of walking us through, how can you improve your program? What are some things you can do? And then after that period is over, the committee will vote whether we have achieved that accreditation or not, or if there's things that we still have to work on as a program.
Excellent.
I think, Matt, just to add on to that, getting this accreditation tells the community that we are offering the highest quality instruction we possibly can to their kids.
Yeah,
Which is what we want to do.
Absolutely. And so I guess building on some of the questions in terms of capacity, you'd mentioned 1 in 5, where
Yeah.
dyslexia runs around 1 in 5. So that would put the potential number of dyslexic students at somewhere between 60 to 100, 70 to 100, right? Knowing that not all of them are going to need this program.
Right.
But if we're allowing 20 in, or roughly 20 in a year, what's the number of students that are on the border, that didn't make the cut, but are on the border of making the cut? And do we find that over time, the Literacy Academy students exceed that tranche of student? Where I'm getting to is the expansion, is it capacity and all the rest of it? Or are we making sure we're servicing the students right above the cut as well as we can? Or is it should we be letting in more? And I know that there's obviously capacity issues with that, right?
Well, I think what I found that's been really helpful about the model that we have is that for some reason, if we find that maybe the student doesn't enter the Literacy Academy, but they go to a special education teacher, that teacher has been trained in Oregon-Gillingham. So the teacher has the skills to implement the lesson, but they also have the knowledge about dyslexia to be able to say, hey, I don't think this student is making progress how I would expect them to make. And maybe they do need something more intensive. And we have that second path to, join the Literacy Academy then, if there's concerns from those teachers. So I really think it comes down to the teacher training in terms of, how that's going to work for the student and where the student's best placement is. And I think that has been really effective.
Okay. And so roughly how many students would you say could make the cut but don't right now?
Yeah, I don't know if, again, it's hard to say that, because here's what I would say, that we have that teacher, right, we have the two avenues towards entrance, and one of them is the teacher referral.
Sure.
And it's based on response to intervention, and so the idea is, and this is truly how it's coming off, which is that when there's a concern about the student's response to the intervention we have, we either bring it to Literacy Academy or a PPT, or we change the plan to try to address the need. That's what we always do. And so, we don't have a ton of referrals coming to Literacy Academy. I think it's twofold. I think one thing is you have to understand is that, right, when we started Literacy Academy, a significant amount of students reading instruction went to those Literacy Academy teachers. So it kind of freed up a lot of other people to do various things as well. So it has like a positive effect in a multitude of ways, so to speak. So I feel like it's going well, but we're always looking, right? We have an ideology of continuous improvement here, right? We're always trying to do better. And so when we talk about opening it up, it's opening it up so we can make sure that the students who would benefit just from that Literacy Academy really get that. And that's what I think we'll be able to do. And every now and then, over the last few months especially, when there's kind of an out-of-the-box situation, we react to it through that teacher referral and like, well, let's try this. And then we, collect data on that student, talk to the parents, have meetings about it. And I think we're really, we've really charted a good course in that direction right now. And we'll continue to, and I'm sure you'll hear about it moving forward, how it's going.
Excellent.
I think
And we've seen that effect of, with more time allotment with the teachers and students, that I guess would be the third quartile student readers. We've seen them improve now that, sort of the Literacy Academy is in effect. We've seen that improvement because the teachers have more time to focus on students.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and when Bob says there's increased time, we're talking about special education teachers and not the
Yeah, the
general
main,
ed-
yeah.
Yeah, because there's more time for that individualized instruction around the reading. And I think one of the things that sets the Literacy Academy apart is whether you're in a Literacy Academy or you're not, you have an Orton Gillingham Fellow working with your instructor on a regular basis, coaching and providing the professional development and monitoring how students are progressing in their reading instruction. It doesn't exist. Of course, it's awesome to have.
Yeah.
So whether or not they're in the Literacy Academy, the level of instruction is incredibly high, and we're always monitoring and making sure that if a student isn't making the progress we would expect based on their profile and the instruction that they're receiving, that we go to the Literacy Academy and do a referral and talk about a particular student, and we may go back and say, okay, now try this, with the student and see what happens, or we might say, okay, you're right. The progress isn't what we would like. Let's increase the intensity and put the student into the Literacy Academy with, one of our dedicated teachers and see, if that's the difference. I think it's also important for us to remember, we look at all the great data and, there's different levels of dyslexia, and some students are going to have a curve like this and some are going to have a curve like that. And they're always going to be dyslexic. So, the progress, varies with students, but, the level of instruction that, Jen and Bob are overseeing is incredibly high.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I would just like to add that I think what's really important is we have had teachers who've been trained in OG for many years. I think the difference is that we always had to bring in a consultant to do all of that training. And it's very costly to bring in a consultant to do that training. And then if you think of what the requirement is, that consultant is supposed to be servicing and coaching those teachers. So that consultant shows up on April 5th, and then they don't show up again until May 12th, and then they don't show up again until June 3rd. So now we have a fellow who is on site every single day that can go over and consult with teachers and work with teachers and coach teachers. And so that teacher can call and say, I'm really struggling. I'm not sure why this child's not making progress. Jen can go over, take a look at the data, look at the lesson plan that's being conducted by the teacher, making sure that they're following that lesson plan format. Maybe thinking, oh, we might need to spiral back over here and reteach this again. So to have somebody on site who's able to do that, it saves the district a tremendous amount of money in professional learning and staff training, but it's that that on-site coaching that happens instantaneously. And I think that's a pattern that we've seen in this district, that we really do get a lot of bang for our buck out of our coaches. And that they're really able to work with these teachers and ultimately help our students to grow. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Excellent. Cool. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Awesome. Excellent presentation. It's been great to watch this this investment really take off and evolve from where it started, and a really great investment all around. And thank you so much for all the work that you guys do, and keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And someday we'll have students who are in the Literacy Academy reading poetry.
Yeah, incredible.
Right? That's success, right?
The thought did cross my mind.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to statement of accounts with Mr. O'Keefe.
Hello, everyone. Okay, we're 9 months in. As of March 31st, our operating fund expense actual totals $4.3 million, or 68.06% of our full-year budget of $109.1. That 68.06 attainment rate compares to 67.99, which is much improved from last month, when we reported that we had a timing difference related to our transportation billings, and we expected it to self-resolve in the next month, which it did. And now we're literally spot on year to year, which is great news, and it is one, indicator that from an attainment standpoint, we're on track to budget. So good news there. On pages 6 and 8 in the package, there are 2 current month transfers, one within the salaries major object code and one within the purchase services major object code. In both cases, accounts with projected savings are moved to accounts with projected shortfalls. And as a reminder, a transfer within the same major object code does not require board action. Over to grants, awarded grants to date, $2,087,000, with year-to-date expenditures of $828,000, leaving us with a remaining balance as of March 31 of $1.258 million. On school lunch, as of March 31st, school lunch revenue totals $2,083,898, or 67.5% of our budget of $3,086,504, and year-to-year decrease of 3.3, which is slightly improved from where we were in the February report. The decrease year-to-year primarily due to a shift in the mix of sales that we've seen all year long. Plus, we're also seeing an increase in our free and reduced roster by approximately 27% since the beginning of the year, or since the same period last year. Total expense through March is $1,873,000, or 65.8% of our full year 25 budget, and represents a year-to-year increase of $44,000, or 2.46%, also an improvement from the February report. The increase year-to-year is primarily attributable to budgeted increases in salaries, equipment, and dairy products. Net income as of March 31st is currently reflecting a positive $211K, resulting in a current fund balance of $1,043,405, which is a month-to-month pickup of about $136,000 in net profit from last month. Some of these funds will be used to cover 3 walk-in refrigeration units that we purchased and will be installed during the summer months in each of the 3 elementary schools. Matt in the Resource Committee asked a question about what's the source of these refrigeration equipment, and would they be subject to tariffs? I've confirmed, I've called the company, and they're a company that's been in business for 90 years in Morehead City, North Carolina, and with very small exception, all of the parts are manufactured in the United States. The entire manufacture of the units are in the United States. So when I say a small piece, one of the vendors where we source parts from has a subsidiary in Canada. So there's just a small number of parts that could be subject to tariff. Over to facility rentals, donations in summer school, facility rental revenue, 202,000, expenses of 191, net income a positive 11,000, and a fund balance a positive 338,000. Donations, revenue 130,000 year-to-date, expenses 209, net income a minus 78, and a fund balance of 100,107. And finally, summer school revenue, 125,000 of revenue, expenses 133, net income a minus 7K, fund balance $164,000. And the next quarterly report for capital will be in May. I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Sean. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Just relieved that the attainment number has finally mirroring last year's, because I've watched that grow every single month and thought, when is this inflection point happening? Is it actually going to happen? So I'm delighted that it happened.
Exactly. I'm very happy as well,
Yeah.
as you can imagine.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
All right, any comments from the public? Next, announcements and future business.
Great. As you started the meeting, I also want to share my welcome back to everybody from spring break. Now we are in the final stretch of the school year, which is very hard to believe. It's going to be one of the busiest times of the year as we celebrate our students and a successful year. And looking forward to all of those events, including in that. We have our AP exams coming soon for our high schoolers. So their preps have already begun with that. And of course, after the AP exams, we get right into our internship in mid-May. And our spring season's underway. Lots to do. So lots going on in the district. At our next meeting, we don't have it here, but we will do, Matt Salvestrini will be here for an update with technology and assistive tech with Ashley Tremblay.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Matt, Julie, all in favor? Excellent. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.